Howdy and welcome back to the podcast. We're going to continue our conversation kind of where we left off, but today we have one of our first guests ever, and then I think my first guest appearance ever, I think, on a podcast, Mr. Dr. J. Sullivan, who also is the host of the Way to College podcast, and he's also, I think, still around with the Creole Consultants, right?
Yeah. Formerly, I'm the owner now. Yeah.
Formerly, you are the owner now.
Yeah.
And if you can, make sure you just keep that guy nice and close to the
Sorry.
face. No, you're good.
Yeah. Yeah. Now I own
Nice.
Consultants. Yeah.
Okay. So what is Creole Consultants, and then how did you guys, and what was that? I guess we were just talking about consulting. And so
We were.
what is Creole Consultants, and then how do you, what was the transition for you now owning the business?
So Creole Consultants is college readiness consulting. Both you and I are from South Texas, and we, I think I was fortunate in that I had a lot of folks that kind of told me what I needed to do to get into college and to get ready for college. And it always felt like I was holding on to like I had privileged information, right? And then I go away to school, come back, graduate, and then I'm teaching at the university. I'm working with first-year college students, and every time I get to know them, they're a lot. Often they would say, "Nobody told me that. I didn't know that. If I'd known that, I'd make different choices." And so me and a couple of colleagues decided to start a consulting company. It was under the name of one of my colleagues for a number of reasons, but then she turned it over to me. She was like, "You're the one that's kind of putting in all of the time, the effort, the money. It should just be under your name." So 2022.
Nice.
Yeah.
So
became
then
my company.
what are you doing inside? Like, do you create relationships with individual schools and go help? Are you working with families? How do you work with people?
So we'll go in, we work with school districts, we work with universities, and then we work with families. We've started to jump into grant writing. And so now we do like with private businesses. So because a lot of the work we do is not only educational development, but even like leadership development. Because even at a school, right, you need good leadership.
Yeah.
So I wrote a grant for a watermelon distributor, the largest watermelon distributor in Texas. He approached me about a grant and asked, if I could then provide training too. So my team's going to be providing training to all of his staff and his workers. So it's a pretty big grant, so we're excited about that. But it's taking what you do in a classroom, right?
Wow.
And you go and you teach, staff, workers, leadership.
How fun.
Whatever they think is important or need, at the business.
I've seen people like, I think Jocko Wilnick, I forgot exactly how you say his name, but he's a Navy SEAL who goes into companies and like does these leadership kind of conversations. Do you have a set like schedule of we're gonna like learn these things and then we're gonna like, do we go into the business first and kind of figure out what's missing and then we create a program design? Or because you're working with a grant, does that change things?
So the grant has specific stipulations, right? There's material that it is all about worker retention and workers' rights. And so what we did was we met with workers, we met with leadership, ownership, and we just asked, what do you on the leadership and ownership side see as needs, right? That you need your staff to know. What do they need to know? And then we met with staff, I think some 100, and we just surveyed them. What do you want to know that'll help you be better at your job?
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And so in everything from like just learning how to manage my check to first aid, safety kind of stuff. So, yeah. And so then we put a training plan together, and that'll start in April, I think.
How cool.
Yeah, so that's exciting.
What's the population of these workers? Are we looking at college educated, not so college educated?
So this is very, very kind of I think timely, right? It is farm laborers, right? So I think we're looking at about 200 200 farm laborers. About half of them are domestic workers, and about half are what the government would term H-2A visa workers. So these are workers that are recruited from Mexico, Central America, and come to the States. Now, they can work here legally because they have an H-2A visa. So it's a visa provided by the government, but as part of that program, they were looking for additional training to streamline that process and strengthen that pipeline. Because as fewer domestic, the reality is a lot of domestic workers don't like doing this work.
Yeah.
So to strengthen that pipeline, well, let's provide training. Let's make sure they know what they're doing. What are they legally responsible for? What are their rights? Things like that.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
And a kind of an interesting time, I think, with Trump being in office. Like, how does that change, like, either the grants or funding or, like, the perception of, like, that section of workers? Like, I guess we accept the workers that are domestic, but we don't accept the workers that are not.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we don't want everyone to do those jobs either. So, like, how do you navigate this new kind of area or time?
Right now, it's kind of a hard pause. Right, because there's a lot of the grant funding has been frozen, and so folks have received some of the money, and then there's some entities that have yet to receive it because money starts. You get money as soon as that training starts. Because of the season, because of watermelon season, our workers don't come in till March, April at the earliest. So our training doesn't start till then. So right now it's kind of a hard pause for us. It's wait and see. Waiting to hear back from the USDA, but we're preparing as if all's a go. So it's interesting, man. As soon as they said we're going to freeze all grant funding, you're like, right? You take a deep breath and you're like, oh man, right? But it's interesting, and I understand the reality of it, and that's the reality, and we just kind of work with it.
I think growing up in the Valley, it would, like, the assumption is, like, definitely it's a very democratic area, which makes sense, right? And so I wonder, like, what's the environment right now down in the Valley?
I think, well, it went red. The Valley went red.
Okay.
All of the counties went red. It was the first time ever that we saw that. And I think, people in the Valley live with the day-to-day, right? We see the immigration. We have a different view, I think, from what the media what you hear out in the media. I don't think it feels like an invasion, right? That people, because you see it and you live with it. I think for the most part, people feel safe. But I think you see inequality. You see the rising cost of gas and produce and whatnot, food. And so I think people, there were a lot of people that just got tired and kind of like, hey, what about us? I can't afford things anymore, right? So I think it's an interesting time. It's very polarized on both sides, very strong, and I think that's a sentiment that you see across the country. Yeah,
there's a lot of benefit, I think, like that I grew up with that was definitely probably more like government funded like opportunities. And so I don't know that I would be like that I would have had the opportunities that I did if I didn't have that environment, right? Because we were such a significant percentage of our population was underneath the poverty line. We were given opportunities like for even something as simple as like free lunch that I didn't really realize was not a thing everywhere until I got out of the Valley and people are like, oh yeah, you just pay for lunch in high school, remember? And I was like, never did. Never paid for breakfast, never paid for lunch. And that was kind of a necessity, not just for for a large percent of that population. I mean, it's also like a luxury to some extent that you don't really think about.
Yeah.
But it's a luxury because nobody else can afford anything else. You know?
Yeah.
I think that my perspective of the Valley and the opportunities that were offered or government programs is definitely influenced. And I don't know, I guess it's because it's been so long. I wonder how people are perceiving the reality of living with what's going on down there versus what the media portrays as the reality of the pressure that's being felt.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think, and I was having a conversation with a buddy about a week ago. What I see is people don't understand how a lot of things work. So I think you left. So now, you didn't know free lunch, free breakfast was a thing until you left.
Yeah.
So you have perspective. And I think a lot of the folks don't leave. And so they don't recognize, right? You get rid of free lunch, free breakfast. What does that mean? That means there are kids that's all they eat. They get their meals at school. We can get into a conversation about how healthy those meals are, right? But they're going to eat something.
Yeah.
The impact on education and on educational funding, right? The Valley is also home to, I think, 2 of the poorest counties in the country. And people don't know how huge government funding is to support and to sustain a lot of things there. So you start talking about cutting free lunch, you start talking about cutting the Department of Education, right? Bilingual ed, people. And so I don't think people understand what these cuts or what it means when you start talking about the potential for cutting funding, cutting programs, and the impact that it has in a place like the Valley. And I think a lot of people don't have perspective because a lot of them don't leave. And so you don't recognize, oh, you mean not everybody gets free lunch? Oh, not everybody has this or that at a school, right? Yeah.
And not everybody goes and visits either. And so, like,
No.
if you live in the culture for an extended period of time, like, you really get to, like, a good understanding of, like, really what, like, the reality is being talked about on these clips everywhere on social media or just, like, on the news. And it's like, I don't know, it seems a little bit different than what's being portrayed. Like, it's not so aggressive, but at the same time, there's nuances that I probably don't understand, that it seems like you kind of have, like, a pretty good, like, handle on. So, like, what happens if we do get rid of these kind of funding programs? Like, what happens?
I think right now a lot of folks are looking at, like, if you're in education, if you're in small business, right? I think you're thinking worst case scenario. I think some folks are like, well, there's no way they'll cut that. There's no way, right? But I think there's going to be change, and I think you kind of have to prepare yourself for that. I don't know what it's going to look like though. On a group text thread with my colleagues, we were talking about the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley is an HSI, and that is a Hispanic serving institution. That's a term that was a government term, and it was to help universities that whose population had a large low income, but also a Hispanic population, and it was to provide, because a lot of those institutions historically used to be very small regional institutions, community colleges, things like that. So they didn't always get a lot of funding. And so now there are a lot of those institutions around the country. What happens to that title? What happens to the monies associated with that? You're going to change an institution. You're going to change a culture. So I don't think we know the full ramifications of what it would mean to get rid of all of these things. It would make an impact, though.
Yeah.
Not for good. Yeah.
So UNLV is an HSI as well, the university here. Large Hispanic population here in town. Like, I didn't know that I was going to ever, like, speak Spanish going out of the Valley, and then here I am, like, speaking Spanish, like, in Las Vegas. Like,
yeah.
Like, you can, anywhere you go, really, like, it's everywhere, right? And so we have that, and then even A&M is an HSI now.
It is.
It's weird to me. We're like, okay, now we're just, like, some degree, like, are we just giving scholarship or, like, opportunities to these impoverished individuals just so that this larger school can ultimately, like, get this massive grant, and then there's not really the support for those individuals that are entering the school? And so it's like, yeah, okay, we've gotten our grant now, thank you, we have 70,000 students our freshman year, and then we expect a 15% drop-off rate from the people that probably couldn't afford to be here to begin with. And so now, but we've already gotten our grant, so what does it matter, right? So, like, our sophomore year, like, is that how that works? Like, once they are technically inside the school, they can claim them as, like, a student, or is it all 4 years that you have to maintain that? Like, how do you maintain an HSI?
So staying in HSI is just the number of students that you enroll and the number of Hispanic students, and then the percentage that are low income. Typically that number doesn't fall off. Like, you're going to see that number grow just because of the number of applicants, number of Hispanic students around the country. There's a lot of criticism around, okay, you're an HSI. What are you doing to retain and support your students? So there's a professor, Gina Garcia, who that's all of her work. And so she's really putting the onus. So she challenges the universities, like, what are you doing to support your students?
Yeah.
It's great that you have the title, and it doesn't guarantee you money. What it means is you have access to money now. There are grants that you can apply for. So among the countless hats I wear, Ben, one of them is I also review grants for the Department of Ed. And one of the programs I review grants for is HSI, Title V, Developing HSI Grants.
How fun.
And so it is because these universities lay out over, several years, what are they going to do to support students? And so it's really exciting because from my end, I can read it and I can say, ooh, that doesn't really work. Or where's the literature to support that? Or that's going to cost a lot more money. That's great that you're ambitious like that, but it's going to need a lot more support. And so it's great that you're an HSI, but then the real work starts with how do you support them, how do you retain them, and then how do you graduate your kids, your students?
Do we have any information on like the population that actually, gets retained and then the population that graduates?
I don't have the latest for like nationally, and then every institution is different.
Fair.
I think the idea that, because this is an idea that I have to challenge with a lot of students. There's an assumption that I'm going to go to college, I'm going to graduate in 4 years. The average college student doesn't graduate in 4 years, probably like 5.5. And so kind of just, man, okay, why? Well, because they've got to work, because college is expensive, they're taking time off, or they're not ready for it, right? A number of factors. And so I don't have like the national data, and then every institution is different. But every institution, the last time I saw that information, and I'm perfectly honest, maybe 5 years ago, and it was something like the retention rate for Hispanic students was something like 60% year to year. Yeah, I think it was from first year retention. And I could be totally wrong. That's what I remember being in a meeting and I remember thinking, because this was an institutional meeting, we were having it. And I remember saying, we're doing pretty good because we were 10%. We were 10 points above that. And I thought, man, we're doing really good compared nationally, but we wanted to do better. Yeah.
How does reviewing those grants look like? Like, you're writing grants and then also trying to review grants from all over around the country, right?
Yeah.
I assume.
Yeah.
What are some things that you've seen that are like definitely like wins, some pros,
Yeah.
and then maybe some ideas that were just like flopped that didn't necessarily work very well?
Well, we never get to see the implementation on our end as a reviewer. So as a reviewer, I'm on a panel, and I'll get 10 applications that I've got to review. That in itself is a really tedious process because you're talking about 100 pages per grant, per application. And then because I've read, I'm reading 4 institutions out of California. They're always on my radar. And so, I'm always reading stuff about different institutions. So it's always fun to see, okay, who got funded and then how are they doing? Following up with them. It's not required, but given the work that I do, I'm always fascinated by what's everybody doing and are they being successful? So, mentoring's typically is positive. Offering a first-year experience course, just because that transition's tough, right? You and I had a conversation about, and I love our conversation. I share your episode with a lot of my students because you talked about do the stuff that you don't want to do so that you can do the stuff that you want to do. I think it's what you said.
Yeah.
That first year's tough for a lot of students. In colleges, man, people think I've got all this free time and I've got parties and now I've got to make decisions for myself. And a lot of students aren't ready for that.
I definitely wasn't ready for that. I mean, I definitely wasn't ready for that. Like I said on the podcast, I think that at the end of the first semester, I was at 0.6 GPA, and it was just because I was so much more interested in being on campus, and like the experience of being on campus was like, this is the dream, like this is the goal, like I made it, right? I'm here. Yeah. I can walk around campus, and like there's so many different like beautiful people around, like this is amazing. And then I can like bike to class, or I can take a bus. I never did public transportation back home because everything's like 5 minutes away, and so like you just like my parents would just drive me, or like like it was super.
Everything's
different.
new. Everything's new. Yeah,
everything.
Yeah.
So
and it's exciting. Well, so So to prevent that, because that happens to a lot of students. First year experience courses, things that help with that transition are really popular and tend to work. I think if there's support behind it.
So we had Grant Cardone in the studio last week, I think. And
I saw that. That's cool.
It was cool. So, and I was sitting there listening to the podcast, and there's the question comes up, well, do I need to go to college anymore?
Mm-hmm.
Is college just a waste of my time or my money? And I think that, like, in that conversation, the opinion was, yes, it's a waste of time. But I would imagine you have a different perspective.
I do. And no disrespect to Grant Cardone or any of the countless individuals that have had tremendous success, right? One thing, as a researcher, I always caution people, well, don't cherry pick your examples, right? We strongly identify with the successful. But for every Grant Cardone, for every Mark Zuckerberg or whoever, there are a lot of folks that weren't successful and that are struggling, right? And you can just look at statistically, like folks around the country. Statistically speaking, you're more likely you're going to out-earn anybody if you go to college and get a degree. That being said, I think just getting the degree isn't going to do enough. And I tell my students, there is this belief, this expectation that I'm going to graduate, I'm going to get a degree, and then everything's going to be kind of laid out for me. And I'm like, no, you've got to, the degree is a piece of paper, but you've got to network, and you're going to have to hustle, and you're going to have to continue learning and challenge yourself and expect failure and overcome failure, right? And so there are a lot of things, a lot of factors involved. The thing that I love about college, Ben, is, again, perspective, like, meeting different people, learning about different cultures, different people, learning about so much more than where I think in high school, like a lot of us, it's like, well, this is what you have to learn because that's the curriculum. I loved that I could learn about what interested me, so I could identify mentors. I could network with folks in kind of like a lab, versus I could do it out in real life. That's tough, and the consequences are much greater in real life. Let me do it in a space where I can fail a little bit, right? And I can learn to overcome that, and I can grow from that, and I can get support, and I can have people that can mentor me and tell me, hey, maybe go this way. Hey, try this out. I love that about college because it's a lab, and it doesn't have the consequences that I think real life has. Yeah.
That's a good point. I think that if I'm looking back to Dr. Lightfoot, he was the first person that I emailed before I got into school, and he was like, "You're not even accepted yet, but yeah, sure. If you want to like come and visit the lab when you get accepted, you can let's set up a meeting." So I ended up getting accepted, and I wanted to go talk to Dr. Lightfoot. And at any point in time where I was like, I really want to go. I'm interested in genetics. He's like, he has a genetics research lab, so I did genetics research. He's like, all of a sudden, I really want to do more applied stuff. Great, let's go talk to Dr. Kreider. I really want to do coaching. Great, let's go ahead and go talk to coach whatever. And I ended up getting an internship because of just I had that individual, that mentor that ultimately like helped kind of guide me along. And I think it's harder to find in real life.
Yeah.
To find that person. It happens, but it's just it's oddly difficult to find somebody that like maybe that they are in business, they're running their company, and they don't have the time, unfortunately. And it's just like, and then their risk is also higher because if they give this individual that they give them more time, then they're less likely to spend time making money for the ultimate like goal of the business. And you don't know like the situation that they're under versus like if you have a grant that's kind of like funding the next couple of years, and that especially at like a tier 1 research university where you have that kind of support, like somebody has the time to kind of just offer and help.
Yeah, no, absolutely, I agree. And I think, look, to be honest with you, Ben, you're the type of person reaching out to Dr. Lightfoot, taking that initiative. Chances are, had you not gone to college, you were probably going to be that person who took initiative. Again, college creates that safe space so that you can take advantage of that and capitalize on that initiative. you're also right that in real life, it's really tough to find those people sometimes, depending on the community you come from. I created my podcast because when I was growing up, I knew lawyers existed. I didn't personally know a lawyer. And later I'd come to find, one of my aunts married a lawyer. But I didn't have a relationship where I felt comfortable going and talking to that person. I had a family doctor. I wasn't going to ask my family doctor questions because I didn't feel like I knew them well enough. But there were a lot of occupations where I didn't know. And I didn't know who to ask. Neither one of my parents finished school. And so they gave me as much guidance as they could. But I remember whenever I met somebody, I was like a sponge and I asked a lot of questions. And the great thing about college, again, is it's like if you're naturally like that, if you're going to ask questions, if you're going to take the initiative, man, it just kind of supercharges that experience, right? Because it puts you in this environment where everybody is kind of open to that. There's that expectation. In real life, it's a lot tougher to do that, I think. And some people are going to disagree, but that's my experience.
Yeah, I think it's also dependent on the environment that I think that's a really good point. If I didn't know any attorneys, I didn't know you could be in real estate. I didn't know. I thought just like homes existed, and that was like, I don't know, you just bought them like from the bank. Really, I think that's what I thought. And it wasn't until I like left and was exposed to more just things that I found out, like you can be in real estate, or you can be in tech. Like that's a whole job. Like if I really wanted to get into tech, like, and then like there's such specific niches within all these things that I never knew that you could ever existed.
Yeah.
And I think like, yes, my parents were like, my mom's my dad's moderately college educated, my mom has a master's degree, but it was still like, go and work for a government agency. My dad was a cop, and so like just go become a cop, or go work for the border patrol, or like I don't know, go work for the school, right? Could be a coach. Like there was nothing outside of that kind of like that thought bubble where it's like this is kind of the only things that are real or that are possible. And it wasn't until I finally like got to talk to more people, I was like, oh wow, like you can, like sales is a thing.
Yeah.
You sell stuff?
Yeah.
Like, I didn't even know that was an idea, like,
and then there's some people that are like, I hate that. Right? I don't want to go and ask anybody to buy anything from me, right?
Fair.
But yeah, absolutely. Then, yeah. So I get excited. Again, another hat that I wear is I introduce young people to different careers, and also remind people that, particularly today, this age, this generation is going to have more jobs, more occupations. They're going to change jobs more often than the previous generation. And that's going to continue to change and evolve just because there's more flexibility. New jobs are being created every day that didn't exist yesterday. And so we are, educationally, we need to be more dynamic. We need to be able to adjust to the demands of society and whatever's out there, whatever is needed at the moment. And so, we don't know what's going to be needed 2 or 3, 5 years from now. And so the challenge is, how do you prepare for that? Well, I think college can still be good because I think it teaches you to be dynamic and to adjust to those changes.
Is there a delay in like what's happening in the real world, or in happening in maybe like the business world, or in real life, in comparison to what's being taught at the university?
I think, yes. I think in addition to, we teach people subject matter, but I think we also have to teach people, right, these interpersonal skills, these soft skills, but teaching people to be dynamic, to be lifelong learners, to be, okay, this is how my job's shifting, or this is what is needed of me now. Let me learn these skills, right? Content creation is a new field. Neither one of us went to school for that, but we both do that. We exist in that space. And a lot of that, I think, is due to our own initiative, our own interest. I think we need to teach young people to do that. We need to, not content creation necessarily, but to be dynamic and to see learning to see jobs as fluid, and to see learning as fluid and dynamic, and you've got to constantly learn and evolve. I don't think schools do that well. I don't know the space that, like, I think schools need to change. I think they do need to look different.
I wonder how they do look, because I mean, and if I looked back on my experience, like what would have I have appreciated to have? And I think maybe because not everyone's gonna have that initiative, right? So you're gonna go to school, like you have a lot of like kids, like not just from the valley, but I use the valley because that's where we're from, right?
Yeah.
But so I'm just gonna use that for now. You have a lot of kids from the valley that maybe never like have the thoughts of taking the initiative to talk to a professor, because again they're like so distant.
Yeah.
Just like we were talking about the attorney or the doctor, and so being forced to, like, you're joining a club, you're joining a group, you're having like a mentor, you're getting assigned somebody. Now there's a staffing issue with like that kind of like like kind of probably an unrealistic expectation. So then how do you still create like an environment of ultimate like mentorship inside of a university that's sustainable?
So I think a lot of universities, what I do see on the career side, the career center side, career services side, at least I see it there at UTRGV. I know other universities do it, where they're tapping alums. And so because there are alums that are interested in sharing their knowledge and in mentoring somebody, and they allow the alums to sort of step up versus saying, oh, hey, Ben, you're going to mentor somebody, right? Now all of a sudden it's an obligation.
Yeah.
But if you go and you say, hey, I'd love to mentor somebody, right? I'd love to share my experiences and guide somebody, offer the guidance that maybe I didn't have. And so I think a lot of universities are doing that, where they're reaching out back to alums, asking alums to serve as mentors and guides. So I think when we think about a fluid or dynamic educational experience, I think we've got to really, I think, invest more in things beyond the classroom themselves. And so, yes, the classroom is important, but then how do we encourage initiative? How do we connect folks with people that are in the know, that are doing the work that they'd love to do, but that also maybe do a little forecasting as what's growing, where are the trends, and how do we guide students in that direction?
I was kind of almost upset during college where, like, in the summers, everyone would do these internships, right? These unpaid internships. And like, you're going to go work for some like big company, right? And like, I had a couple of friends that ended up going to work for Shell. Those were paid. But there's plenty of other examples where maybe you go work for a sports team, right? So like, you're working for the Dallas Cowboys and content creation, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And I never, like, I couldn't. Like, there was no way that I was going to be able to leave for an extended period of time and like just not get paid for, 3-4 months at a time. And I always wanted to have that experience, but it never seemed accessible, unfortunately. And so, I wonder if you could like have those mentors ultimately. I don't know. Like, I've always wanted to see support for, especially underprivileged individuals that had the opportunity to like just even leave home, like that alone, like is so, like, you realize like you have to learn how to eat, like not just learn how to eat, but like you have to be able to afford the food, you have to be able to afford the rent, and like those two things immediately like you can have the idea that I want to go to A&M or I want to go to Stanford or I want to go to these places, but you can't, like physically you cannot leave home. And so you end up getting stuck in this kind of like weird situation. So I've always wanted to see support on that end. I just don't know how you do that,
I think so. I think in universities, some universities do it well. I think it's a college by college and by college. I mean, if I look at the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley, I think their College of Engineering, their College of Business do a great job of encouraging their students, their majors, to apply for internships. And I think they have a pretty good pulse of their student body. And so they encourage and try to connect them with internships that are going to be paid, so that it's not such a drain on them, or where, I've got to make a decision between working or doing an internship. So I think recognizing your population, recognizing that need, and then creating and having those more opportunities, creating more of those opportunities. So it's with existing employers, but then also that alumni pipeline. Who are my alums that can provide one internship? Ben, can you provide one internship for a student? And then you grow it from there, right? And now you can tell great stories, and you want to sell other alums on it. Let me tell you about Ben. And Ben got one intern, and that one intern, boom, now Ben's got 2 interns a year, right? So it's identifying those alums telling some great stories, and then growing the program organically, I think, like that.
I have a question about, is school too expensive?
Yes.
And how do you fix that? Like, how do you fix, I don't know that there's a fix, like I just asked that question and I'm like, is that real?
Yeah, I think all of the research shows that it has exceeded the rate of inflation and the cost of living. Like, I think historically you've seen public institutions, you've seen states invest less and less money in their public institutions. And so there is that inequality. So now the federal government's got to kick in more grants, more free money. How do you fix it? Man, I don't know. That's a larger, that's a dissertation matter. I've actually had a couple of guests, and I had one gentleman who I think could speak to this well. We didn't even get there because we were just like talking about, like, as for young people that are applying to college, what is the actual cost for me? And so it is expensive. I think there's plenty of low cost things parents can do. I think one thing I would say, like, particularly for your listeners, because I've had people reach out to me. I have a scholarship database that I'm constantly adding to. And so parents will reach out and they'll say, college is expensive. I say, yeah. But I think what they don't know is, like, just because it's private, right? And typically private universities have a huge sticker tag. But a lot of times they sometimes have bigger wallets and will give more money to students, particularly if they're deserving and they need it. And so I think don't look away. Don't sort of cross that school off your list just because of what you see, because that's not the actual cost. And so I think a lot of times parents are driven by what they see as the cost, and that's like, we're not going to apply. Whereas maybe if we'd applied, man, we have more opportunities. We have more options for ourselves. And so, like, that's something that I try to stress with parents. Whenever I'm meeting with parents and students, hey, don't discount a university because it's private. Let's give yourself some options. You want options because you don't want to just apply to one and that's where I'm going to get in. That's where I'm going to go to A&M. And then all of a sudden, I don't have any options. I can't even leverage anybody against A&M because, right? So doing stuff like that. There are things that I think parents can do, without breaking the bank.
I think that highlights the need for early foresight. Like, this isn't a conversation that happens when I'm a senior.
No, right? Because you're operating out of fear and out of panic and expedience, right? I got to get this done. So we don't even get to have a good conversation about this. We haven't done any research. Yeah, take your time and start early. If I knew, I tell people I went to Stanford because of the weather. I didn't even look at their financial package. And the thing is, Princeton, I got in, I was very fortunate. Got into a lot of schools, had options. And I remember Princeton calling and saying, well, say we're really excited for you. Where else are you thinking? Because we haven't received your commitment card. Oh, and I didn't tell them, but wherever you're looking, I think we can compete. Right?
Yeah.
Now, okay. Still, it didn't make a difference. I didn't tell my parents that. I should have. My parents would have said, all right, let's look at the options. My parents didn't know either. Yeah. They trusted me to make that decision. I'm 18. 18. They both had more college experience. They just didn't finish, but they were relying on me to make that decision. That shouldn't happen. Don't let your 18-year-old make that decision, folks. It might have been a different thing for me. Yeah. Don't wait to have that conversation.
Are you happy that you went to Stanford?
Yeah.
Why?
I tell my students every day, Ben, I had an expectation of college, right? Oh, college is going to be like this. And it just blew it out of the water. It was I had a work ethic in high school. I had a work ethic. I didn't have an academic work ethic. I did well in high school because I was a smart kid, and I knew what I needed to do to get an A, right? I think a lot of us do. Yeah. I worked hard in athletics. I worked hard in extracurriculars. Academically, I did what I needed to do to get an A. At Stanford, I developed an academic work ethic because everybody around me was brilliant. And It was rare that you saw anybody slacking. Everybody was studying. Everybody was working. Did people party? Yeah, absolutely, people partied. But man, during the week, people were studying. Late nights in the library, 24-hour library. So it's like I developed a good academic work ethic. And then you're around excellence. Like I always tell my students, I had classes with Olympians. And you feel a little small. You feel like, what am I doing here, right? But you talk about you want to raise your game. Man, I wanted to raise my game. I love that environment. And I think had it not been that experience, and maybe it was, like I said with you, right? Maybe it was naturally in me. But I think Stanford pulled it out of me because I was a shy kid. In high school, I was shy. I wasn't the type that was going to speak up. I didn't take a lot of initiative. I was just in the right place, right time, was in the right classes. But at Stanford, I came out of my shell. I took initiative. I was talking to folks. I was networking from my first year on. I don't know if it would have happened somewhere else. So, yeah, I loved it, man. It was amazing.
I really like the idea of surrounding yourself with other people who are great.
Yes.
I really like that idea a lot.
Absolutely. You need people to push you. You can't get complacent.
There's just a different environment when you walk into the room. I remember walking into the room at A&M in the powerlifting room, and 8 of those athletes were all Team USA representatives. Everybody, like there was 8 of us, and so it was me and then like 7 other guys. And it was like, oh, there's not really any messing around here. Like everyone shows up every Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, and then sometimes on Wednesdays and sometimes on Mondays, and everyone's focused on their diet and everyone's focused on like what kind of program they're on. And we're here to work. Like, yeah, we're messing around every so often, but we're here to work. Yeah. And like, oh, that guy's working at Shell, and this guy has, this guy's getting his PhD, but he's also training 3 days a week. Like, it was just a different environment of like nonstop, like hard work, like true hard work that was really kind of neat. It was very different than high school where you could just like hang out and get by. Like, I'm doing all right. It was a very different environment.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah. Yeah. I tell my students, in high school, I think people called me a nerd. I was not a nerd, right? I didn't put in the work. I didn't get excited about learning. At Stanford, I nerded out. Like I was a sponge, and I was, don't do this for your listeners. If you're a college student, don't do this. But I used to go to the bookstore and I'd buy books for classes I wasn't taking. Just because I'd walk around and because I could. I'm going to buy this book and buy this book. Man, this looks really interesting. I just wanted to absorb everything. I just wanted to learn so much. And then to be around amazing people and even, the faculty, world-renowned faculty, and having amazing conversations every day. Oh, man. Yeah. Yeah. It's absolutely surround yourself with greatness, surround yourself with excellence, surround yourself with people that are going to push you every day. Yeah.
How do you think the academic environment has changed over the last 30 years? Like since, I guess, or maybe 20 years since we were in school versus now. I feel like there was a time, and maybe it still exists in this way, but where it was not necessarily perceived as like super left wing. It's just like, if you're gonna, it's very progressive inside of schools or inside of colleges. Now it's kind of like that's the idea, especially with the Harvard president lady who was like trying to avoid the conversation about anti-Semitism and couldn't even say that word, and like versus like having just thought leaders that are like, hey, we're here for to learn and push the boundaries here. How do you think it's changed, or do you think it's changed over the last 20-ish years, and if so, then why?
I don't think it's changed. I think the people that have a voice, right? I think you have two sides that are very vocal with very specific ideas about what they believe or what is happening. But I think if you go into a college classroom, I don't think much has changed. I think faculty speak their mind. Faculty do what they're there to do, right? They're going to teach students. My experience is they're going to teach students to think critically. They're going to challenge them. I think that still happens in colleges all around the country. I think asking like, okay, a university president, and I recognize that a university president is a kind of a figurehead, right, and an exemplar from the university. But I think their job is very different because they are the spokesperson. They're beholden to regents and trustees. They just have their different expectations. I don't think we should look at university presidents to determine what is happening at a university. I think you got to be in a classroom. And I think sometimes the people that are the most vocal are the people who are being challenged the most. And I think you need to be challenged. I think you need to be a little uncomfortable. I think we all do on both sides. I don't care which side you're on. I think if you are comfortable, and you're going to stand your ground and you're not going to allow yourself to entertain an opposing thought, there's something wrong. I don't care which side you're on. And I think that was the great thing about college was all of a sudden it introduced counter thought, right? Counter arguments to things that I believed. And that was good. I needed that. So do I think the university has changed? No. I think that happens every day in a college class. I just think sometimes the people who are pissed off the most, well, now everybody has a microphone and everybody can complain about it.
When does Dr. J become the president of UTRGV?
I don't want that responsibility because I don't want to be beholden to anybody. I love the classroom. I still teach part-time. I love working with students. And I always tell my students, I'm not going to tell you what to believe. But whatever you believe, I want you to understand why you believe that, where those beliefs come from. And I want you to be able to support those beliefs. Don't believe something because somebody else told you to believe that. I love that. And, my job is to help students be successful, help them stay in school, and help them think critically about themselves and the world. And as long as I can continue to do that, I'm good. I don't need to be president.
I think that's a massive learning skill to like, why do I think this, especially with so many voices? It's so loud everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I'm just supposed to think this or like this or do that because you're fed it constantly. Even if you like if I start spending extra time on a reel that maybe leans one way or like has a specific like a discussion or agenda, it's gonna feed me more of that stuff. Maybe just I'm purely interested in the idea.
Yeah.
Great. Like, but then it can ultimately like feed me a specific like direction of that idea rather than like feeding me both sides and then letting me decide which side to go. I think it's really important to why do I like this or why do I not like this or why do I believe that I should think or not think this way?
Yeah.
I think it's a huge deal to have a conversation with students with.
And a lot of them have never entertained that question. Why do I believe whatever I believe? Yeah.
Makes me think, why do I believe? I don't know. It's fun. It's fun conversation. I think I'm in an MBA program right now, and it's definitely, I think it forces me to be challenged in a way that I wasn't challenged outside in the regular day-to-day world. And I think there's definite pros to that. Like I'm learning, maybe I come off kind of aggressive to a population. And so like, that's not necessarily always a bad thing. I think it's like realizing that there's a way to communicate to specific audiences that will ultimately like capture that audience. And so either I can, if necessary, I can learn and realize, look internally and say, okay, maybe I'm being more aggressive right now. And maybe my goal is, I'm trying to get a new client or I'm trying to like work with a new business or whatever it may be. Like I'm trying to attract that specific thing for whatever reason. Maybe I soften my approach, or maybe I don't even soften my approach. I just have somebody else have that conversation for me, right? Like I can build a team that's like, okay, we're going to be dynamic in our team. Yes, I'm the more aggressive individual, but I have, a partner or an employee that like they handle sales and they're really soft. Yeah. And so like we have that person kind of lead the charge. So I think like school definitely, even now to this day, still is like definitely a challenge at times.
I think that's a good thing.
I think
right?
so.
What did we talk about? Being challenged, right? Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah. I think if we're too comfortable, we get complacent. Yeah. We don't grow. And I think we need to grow. I think that's part of humanity. That's part of our essence, right? We need to grow. We need to be challenged. I love learning new things every day and being challenged every day, man.
How do you approach challenge today?
with an open mind, with practice. And I think recognizing, right, that there's so many voices out there. When I think of challenge, I immediately think to social media, and kind of I've been kind of on the fence about how do I get off, but I can still promote my business and the work that I do, but personally just leaving that space because it's just not a productive space for me right now. And so I see that from, as a challenge, right? What is sort of the norm in society? How do you step away from that, but still have a voice? So, yeah, I think entertaining those thoughts, not running from it, but dealing with challenge, I think is how I approach it.
It sounds like you're also doing a lot of things in order to like force yourself to like experience challenge. You're almost voluntarily assigning challenges to yourself. Yeah.
I have so I do have trouble. One challenge thing that I'm working on is boundaries, because I think setting limits, because I'm constantly learning, constantly growing, constantly looking for challenge. So I take on a lot of projects. And so it's about streamlining, being able to say no to things. And I think that's another challenge in hustle culture, hustles right today, where we're doing multiple things. I think, while that's great, I think even more important is, can you say no? And say, does this, whatever it is that I'm putting on my plate, add any value? Sure, it might add some dollars, right? But does it add value to my life? And does it take me away from the people I care about and love? And so I think just as we are eager to take on things, I think we have to be able to also stop and question, is this worth taking on? And so that's one thing, that's the challenge. The other challenge, so social media, and then setting boundaries for myself.
I feel like that's a really hard one that I struggle with as well.
I think a lot of folks in our business do.
It's hard. Like,
Yeah.
you want to do a lot of things, but at the same time, is doing a lot of things the right thing to do? I've talked to people where it's like, Ben, just choose something. Do one thing and just do that one thing, and that's it. And part of me is like, I don't like that is a challenge.
Yeah.
But I just don't know that that's maybe necessarily the right challenge for me, maybe at this time in my life. Like, I think that there's a time for that. But I don't even know if I'll ever just do like one thing. Like, I'll probably always have the podcast, and I'll probably always have like another, business, or at this point 3. Like, it's just kind of how it goes. I don't know.
And maybe it's just 3. But it's better. 3 is less than 4.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure there are things that come your way, Ben, that you could absolutely take on. Is it 1? Probably not. You're like me. I don't think it's never going to be just 1. I constantly need to be challenged. But I know that there is a sweet spot for me. And right now I'm figuring that out. There's probably a sweet spot for you too.
It's interesting. Do you ever want to run for anything ever again? Are you done?
No. For your listeners out there, right? I was school board president, ran for school board, did a 4-year term. It was a great experience. I loved working for students because that's who I worked for. And I think I was fortunate in that my identity was never tied to the position. So I took the loss hard the night of, and then the next day, new day. I was able to walk away. And people ask me all the time, have you ever thought, yeah, I'm not interested. Mm-mm.
That's one of those boundaries, it sounds like.
That's one of those boundaries, yeah. Absolutely. Firm no.
I wish that I knew more about what you were doing at that time so that I could have probably some better questions. But it's in a unique area. I understand that like there's a lot of different challenges around schools, but just from what I know about our shared school experience, it's an interesting, difficult, challenging, very challenging location.
I think anybody that works in public education, it's challenging. And I think regardless of your position, whether it's school board member, school teacher, student, right? Regardless of the position you hold, it's challenging. And anybody that says that they can figure out schools or they've got the answer, they're lying to you. They're selling you a bill of goods, right? They are tough. There are so many factors involved, and even if you just look at the school itself, you can't fix it, you can't address it without looking at the community where it exists, without looking at the labor force, right? There's so many factors, so many things involved in that. And I think life's complex. And anybody tells you that it's easy, no. And if I've got an easy solution for a school, no, probably not. Could we do things better? Absolutely. But it was challenging. I will say though, Ben, I think I was fortunate, and I was fortunate to be a part of a good team. I think as a team we worked well together, every member of that board, and I think we found the right superintendent when we needed at that time, and we were able to do a lot of things. We got a lot of things done, and I'm really proud of the work that we did. Yeah.
Sounds like a pretty good chapter of your life.
Absolutely. Yeah. Except for the drama. But the work itself was good work. I'm glad I did that work. That was good for me. I needed to do that for the community.
It's cool. I've always wanted to go back to EdCouch and I got invited to do like 5th grade career day.
Yeah.
And part of me was like, I don't know, 5th grade just seems so early.
It is. That's another thing, right? That schools today, I think more so than ever, they want kids to pick something. Again,
Yes.
because I think, again, schools and a lot of institutions, we operate on really old models. And we want a kid to pick something so that then they can study it and get them ready to be whatever it is they're going to be for the rest of their life. Those are the terms we talk to them in, not recognizing or not acknowledging that they're probably not going to do that. What we want to do is we want to expose them to these things. Sure, let's introduce them to Ben, but let's also introduce them to other couple of folks. Let's show them that they could do any one of these things. They could do these things for a few years, then move on to something else and move on to something else. What we do want to express and emphasize is their need to continue learning. They need to be good communicators. They should be driven and learn to set goals for themselves. And they need to learn to adapt and evolve. And I think then we'll prepare them for a lot of things. And I think that's how we need to operate. But we operate on old models. And asking a kid in 5th grade, what do you want to do? And I had a student recently tell me that in middle school, they wanted them to choose a path. Choose a path? I struggle picking underwear in the morning, and you want me to pick the path for like the quote unquote rest of my life? Come on.
I will never forget. I think we did you do tests like at 7th, 6th, 7th grade to figure out like what jobs you're gonna be best for, and I was like, "That's it? Like that? Those are my options?" Like, I didn't realize like that was all I could do. Like it seems so pigeonholed, where I was like, "Wow, what if I wanted to do something else?" It's like, well, you're probably not best suited for that. It's like.
So let me ask you, are you doing any of those things now?
I don't even know what those things were. Well, probably not. No.
Probably not, right? Because content creation didn't exist.
Yeah.
And some of the work that you're doing now, real quick, tell me, what are you doing? You got the podcast.
I got the podcast. I own equity stake in the Las Vegas Venom, which is a sports team, and I'm the CEO for them and director of sponsors. And then I have IE Health, so I formulated the supplement, and then we work with personal training, and then we also own now an apparel brand, and I'm the CMO for that company, and then also equity stake as well for them.
Okay. Yeah, I guarantee you none of those things
No.
were on that, right? Those were none of the results, right? So yeah, whatever. For kids out there, right? If you have taken any of these, don't get down on yourself. You can do so much more.
Not even just for kids, but even for adults. I think that's
Yeah.
the wildest thing as well. Like I remember going to a graduation at UT for one of the guys I went to high school with, Angel, and there was a guy who was like one of the top cardiologists in the world. And he was getting his bachelor's degree in history or in political science or whatever, one of those two. And I was like, man, even later on in life, you could really, you can just make a change.
Yeah.
Like, you can still be adaptable. You can still, and so like those things that you teach very early on to these kiddos are ultimately things that are pretty consistently like the things that you should probably have for the rest of your life.
Absolutely.
Right. And I think that's super neat. I think I love that idea.
Absolutely. You know, I a lot of my guests have started in one thing and then have moved on to something else. I've interviewed, I don't know, 175 plus people. And I always ask my students, how many of them do you think are doing what they said they wanted to do at 18? You get all kinds of responses, right? That number's 13. 13 of those 175. They've all moved on. They moved up within a field, or they're doing something completely different. And I think that's normal, right? And that's what the research shows. We're not going to be doing one thing for the rest of our lives. If we do, great. Good for you. You're not. That's not normal.
It is not normal.
Yeah.
Where can people find you?
So people can find me on, if you still have TikTok, I'm Dr. J. But like, so on the Way to College podcast on Spotify, and I have a YouTube channel, The Way to College, and then on the website, lifeandcareerprep.com.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time, man.
Ben, this is exciting. Thank you. Thank you so much. Now I get to brag about this, about you.
Hey, I'm just out here existing, man. I'm just trying to do my best. And I think, it's been a hell of a ride.
Yeah.
It's been a hell of a ride. And I think that, it's fun to, I don't know, it's something nostalgic almost to some degree, like talking to someone from the Valley that like, I don't know, is doing things and like existing, but like also like your wife was my teacher. Her mom was my 5th grade teacher. Yeah. Like it's still, I don't know. It makes it feel like I'm still home to some degree.
Yeah.
Like you're never too far away, And I think that's kind of a cool idea. Like I'm still Ben from the Valley. Like that doesn't change, Like the what it looks like maybe changes, but like, and the experiences have added, but it's really kind of cool to just like to sit here and like to talk with somebody that's from home.
Yeah.
And we're in Vegas.
Yeah. Well, the pleasure is all mine, man.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Love y'all.